Okay, so I'm following up some of the discussion I said about incoherence and the problem of thought being incoherent. And I was suggesting that basically thought, and it's coming out of David Bohm's stuff, sort of saying that thought is a collective, what do you want to call it, an ongoing sea or an ongoing current of collective thought that is very fragmentary, and the individual sort of participates in that. And the task is to learn how to think by observing one's thought in its fragmentary notion. And I mean, Krishnamurti will even, he'll make a move toward awareness, and he'll say there's a kind of an awareness that is beneath the level of thought. And thought is very limited for Krishnamurti. At any rate, I thought I would try to follow that out a little bit and just further get at some of these issues of incoherence by talking about just one issue within YouTube, and it's the ongoing deliberation about the extent to which people experience themselves as free or are in fact free. There's so many haggles about it. Is it free? Is it determined? Is it some sort of? Is it randomness? Is it volition and decision making? Where is it? I mean, how do you locate it? Is it in the brain? Is it in communication technologies? Is it all an illusion? There's so many different folks who are coming at it, and I noticed it, not only was there in Dick the Coughlin's claim when he was picking on Venom Fang X, saying, well, if it's going to be suicide for the Christian, that's not going to work because it has to be death by natural causes. And so we have this notion of naturally caused death as opposed to suicidal death, which does seem to have some sense of agency. Now, again, some of this can be problematized, but if you go to, today, conference report shot up a video response to Peter at Tool Time, and they're sort of haggling about the question of diet, and is dietary practice chosen? Is it not? Is it cultural? To what extent do people have an actual sense of deliberation and freedom and choice? To what extent do they not? And even in this too, Gary's ridiculous videos. I mean, he wants me to respond to him. Part of me is just reluctant to do it because he's somewhat being ridiculous. I mean, he plays this video where he's going, "Oh yes, he says that I'm just saying that consciousness is a fact. It's a fact. It's a fact, 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 and that's all I'm doing, and that I'm making this out to be super fantastical or something." And no, I'm trying to get at the question of, could consciousness have not been? What are the odds that consciousness emerged? It seems like consciousness couldn't have not been, especially those people who want to claim hardline determinism. And it also seems that if you do want to say that consciousness could have not been, the onus is more upon you than the person who says, well, it seems like it couldn't have not been now that it is. Now, I could be wrong. I'm happy to say thought is incoherent. I'm not suggesting that I think I'm right. I'm throwing this out to try to observe our own sense of thought, right? I mean, it was more of an experiment by which we're trying to observe thought as we're engaging. And again, just the fact of engaging is what's so interesting. We're trying to persuade one another. We're trying to talk with one another as if in talking with one another we will influence and bear some agency. I mean, it's almost like humans are an animal that is able to domesticate itself through its talk, and to that extent it exercises an agency over itself. Okay, talking about 10 miles an hour here. I'm talking on the inhale, I guess is what they sometimes say. I think different ways to frame some of these questions, and this would be, I'll throw a question out there for Gary, and you can chew on this, Gary. Gary, the video that I want to see from you is the video of what would have been the better world. I mean, you seem to say that this world is crap, this world has a bunch of suffering, shows no evidence of anything like a forethought or anything like a I don't know, a management of what could be reasonable concerns. I mean, if anything, it all just seems a messy crap and shows no forethought, or if it did, again, I don't know what the right expression to use is there, but it's a mangled, it's just mangled. The question for you would be, if you, rather than the blind forces of nature, were designing life, what would life look like? What is it that you would have done to have designed life so as to make it so much better than it is now? Or even better, like right now when we look out in the world and we see all kinds of people playing sports and busying their time, and again, sports are a big thing, and other ways that people occupy their time. If you had your druthers and you could get your way, everyone, let's just say they jump into a virtual world. What are they doing in this virtual world? I mean, besides not suffering, besides minimizing the suffering and the hardship and the loss, what exactly are people doing in this virtual world? I mean, I would like to hear some of that. Okay. The the other issue about free will and determinism that I think I want to get at here, I'm trying to get all this in, as quickly as I can, but is the degree to which some of the problems of free will and determinism have to do with our ability to think and how limited thought itself is. That is, the range of action and the freedom by which we act in the world seems to be a different level than the thought about our freedom, our thought about our ability to act. That they both may have some degrees of freedom or some latitude of decision making and choice or agency nestled within them, but they do seem to be qualitatively differently. That they do seem to be qualitatively different. And the thing that I would do to try to illustrate this is try to think about games of chess. Now, I've heard people on more than one occasion just wax on about how awesome chess is, and they say chess is an amazing game of intellect, and it's this game that has, millions and millions, I don't know, billions of moves. It has so many moves that the number of moves rivals the number of atoms in the cosmos. I mean, people give these outlandish claims about chess and its complexity. Again, the amount of calculation that goes into it. And I think I know what they mean, and there is a forethought in pre-planning numbers of moves, sequence of moves in advance. But there's another sense in which I just want to go, this is a bunch of horse feathers. There are more possible moves in a game of billiards than there are in a game of chess. That is, billiards is analog, chess is digital, and not only is billiards analog, but it's analog meaning that it has infinitesimal calculus problems at all points. That is, there's literally an infinity of number of moves in a billiards. You can do masse shots, you can do banks, you can do combinations, you can go off rails, and you can do it harder, softer, that has all kinds of physical manipulation of analogic value, whereas the chess moves are all either or. It's either this move or that move. They're digital and you can quantify them. And because they can be quantified, we can reason about them and make it seem like there's a great amount of free thought and agency exercised in, I guess, in a game of chess, or at least a great amount of thought, and that sort of freedom of thought allows for interactions between people. Now, and again, the computer plays chess. The computer, I guess, you're going to have robots one day play pool, whatever that means. But I think the point is that a game of billiards, it has an infinite an infinite higher number of possible moves than any game of chess. That is, a game of billiards could go on indefinitely, literally indefinitely. And I think when you start to think about that, it starts to become apparent that we do traffic in different kinds of worlds. There is a kind of analog world where you have just, it's sometimes called, these infinitesimal problems where it's, there's not discrete distinctions and boundaries. What you find is just more and more gradient of more or less. I mean, when Gregory Bateson differentiates between digital and analog, he says, look, you can have exactly 3 tomatoes. You can never have exactly 3 gallons of water. Now, some people want to rile against that, but I think if we want to think about it, yeah, that there is something about the difference between quantities and those kinds of volumes which aren't discrete, right? There are numbers, but then there are also analogic values which are infinitesimally varying. And I think those are the places, it's the discrepancy between the digital and the analog where I think we experience that sense of freedom. We sort of leap over gaps and bounds by by way of sliding back and forth between digital and analog manipulations. I think at any rate, there's a great line by Nietzsche where Nietzsche says, man is a thinker, that is, he makes things simpler than they are. Okay, well, thanks.